Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Okay, well, hello. Welcome to Expedition Self. Conversation, we gear it towards helping you go inside of you. And, that's not the easiest thing, given that we have all of these kind of glass floors, right, that we sometimes can see through, but sometimes can't, that they keep us from getting deeper and deeper into who we are. So I am Sam Parrotto, and I'm so glad you're here. So today we are going to be talking about innocence, its mission, and how, when you really drop into it and access it, it provides you with the foundation to stay or have more grit in life. Grit's been a really important word to me because I feel like it's just so easy to run from moments, because they feel toxic, a really popular word these days, or because they just feel so emotionally draining or so hard to handle and unsettling. So having that, to me, is one of the ways that we make sure that life shows up for us because we show up for it, right? So I know, when I was thinking about this, who would imagine that innocence could actually lead to more grit? But because it's really, you think of innocence and you think fragile, delicate, right? Like it can actually be permanently breakable. I don't think that it is, and I think when it's present, we're actually stronger. So that's where we're going to end up today. But before we go there, I want to remind you this is definitely a call-in show. The number, grab a pencil, is 202-570-7057. You can call in and just say hello. You can connect with what I'm saying and answer a question, or you can share something just out of your life that has meaning for you. I mean, really anything at all. Right, because I know that we all grow more when there are multiple viewpoints that bring it to life. And if you've listened to some of my shows up to this point, I don't get a lot of callers, but I'm working it all the time because I just think it would be it's more fun when we have someone call in. And, I do try to pack the hour full of helpful thoughts and ways that you can ponder whatever subject. And it's always made better when someone else shares, but also if you take some time after the hour and just free write and just think about everything that comes up for you, because I trust that this conversation is in some way speaking to some part of you that's looking for a voice. And so the idea that you can listen to the show and then write about it afterwards or spend 15 minutes even just pondering it is really, to me, the best use, right, of our time. Well, before we dive in, I just want to share with you, I think I mentioned it last week, but this week my mom has left for Africa for 2.5 months, and I am feeling the missing of her for sure. She's lived with me for 20 years, so this is the first time we've been away from each other for this long, since that time. And all the appliances are breaking down, and the birds outside are like, where'd she go? Like things just don't quite feel the same. But the thing I wanted to share with all of you about her, it maybe as some inspiration and maybe because there's a connection to today's show too, is that, she's 80 and she has been to Africa before, but she always wanted to go back and really immerse herself there. And of course, when COVID started, that she was supposed to go that year and couldn't. So she'll be volunteering at a veterinary hospital. She's doing photography while she's there. She signed up through a program called African Impact, but she doesn't know anyone. She went by herself. So when she and I talked about her trip and why it was so important, she said, I can't put it in words, but I just know I need to be there. There's just something it's going to provide, and I have no idea what it is, but I feel like I will be permanently impacted. And so the part that I want to make a point about is how we just know we need to do something. Like this deeper sense of who we are, the soul self, the spirit, right? It's beneath all the comings and goings in life. It calls to us or it whispers to us. And without us really knowing the why of it, but being willing to follow that voice, that calling, that whisper, I just think it's the most remarkable and wondrous thing about being human, that you can actually get a feeling like that you can know it in your body, and then you can act on it. I know not everyone can find a way to do that, but I think there is a place that knows when we're supposed to follow this thread. And so I like to picture it, and you probably could do a meditation about this, where you picture like one stone and then a next stone that you step on, that the edges are like all lit up, like they're lit from underneath, that it's leading us somewhere. And I do think that's going on for us every day in the background, whether we realize it or not. That we're following this path, and that part lives in every cell in our body. It's leading us to something. And it's as I think about it, it's not always about going somewhere. It can be about discovering a book that you happened upon in your bedroom, hidden behind the box in the corner, or all of a sudden thinking about someone's name and remembering that person that you knew, and then picking up the phone and calling and talking to them. So this is the thing, we really have to heed that inner aspect of ourselves now, I think more than ever, because when we do, our lives are unknowingly enriched, and so are those lives that we touch. So her first night was met with a hippo serenading her outside of her window and a roaring lion across the grassland. So I'm curious, why do you think these moments happen and are important? That serendipity that occurs because we listen to that inner calling to act on our soul's need. And so this is the real thing I'm playing with all the time, is what makes life truly rich for us? How do we get the most out of our time here, knowing all the challenges and all that goes on, the art and the drama and the being experience that we face? Like, how do we hold the needle in our hands, and make the stitches that fashion every day into something that takes our breath away? And ultimately, how do we make sure that when the end of life greets us, this life, that we feel completely satisfied and full and grateful for the experiences that were created by us and also bestowed upon us? Yeah, I think that's kind of what's been in the background this week for me as I've thought about my mom. Okay, well, so with that, let's talk a bit about innocence. I think we should start with the idea that innocence is naivete, unknowing, fragile. And I think this certainly applies, right, when we think about children and animals, and that they don't know what they don't know. And to the extent that we are able to retain a vibrant relationship with our inner child, then that kind of innocence is something you can tap into, probably right now, right? That feeling of being naive and open. I have to tell you, though, that when I think of this kind of innocence and I let my psyche really seep into it, it's not a bright, cheery space for me, because I feel like some of my innocence was taken advantage of by people who should have protected it. And it's important, before we charge off on opening up the possibility of being innocent in a way that's empowering for us and helpful, grounding, that we recognize that innocence can have sorrow attached to it. That this is real. So for many of you listening, you may feel like there is pain around this in your lifetime. Sometimes in our innocence, we are hurt by those we trust most. And it happens more frequently than I wish it did. Sometimes I think that to truly understand love, we must first have to understand the need to protect ourselves, right? And hide and defend. And certainly, many times, this part of being human happens when we're children and we get caught in an adult's incomplete healing process or another child's, growing up experience. Oh my gosh, I see that we have a caller. Ruthie from Chicago, welcome to the show.
Okay,
And
now.
what have you got to bring to us today?
Well, I just want to say how much I'm loving the show already. And how nowadays they use the term beginner's mind a lot. And
Yeah.
I've never quite connected beginner's mind with innocence and kind of with the inner child or the young part of ourselves. And I was listening to you and going back to, when I was young and whether I followed what you talked about, where's the juice? Where's the magic, in finding that book behind the, in the shelf that I never thought I would. So I'm wondering if you could speak to me a little bit about how the young self and innocence and beginner's mind all kind of work together.
Okay. So you broke up just a little bit. So you were saying you were wanting to connect this idea of this young innocence with the idea of beginner's mind?
Well, beginner's mind and beginner's mind, innocence, and then maybe how we lose that, that we kind of have it, more of this intuition that you're talking about when we're little, I think, and then something cuts it off, and then now we have to kind of return to whatever beginner's mind is, if it is innocence, and how we get back there.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like you just kind of described it. I mean, the way that you spoke about it just now is this idea that when we're young and we have this intuitive sense of things, and it is that we are actually in that innocent space, and how that does translate to a willingness to see something as fresh and new as a blank page, right? And how those things are connected. And I probably will talk more about that in the show, but the way you just kind of linked it is awesome.
Well, I feel sad. At what point do we, when we talk about losing our innocence, what makes us lose our innocence, and then why have the Zen master said, get back to that?
Yeah. Well, I hope I actually talk some more in a way that you go, yeah, that fits with what I was thinking about it. Because I certainly, in my own experience, feel like my innocence in life when I was young, that it was given freely. And then the people that received it didn't necessarily recognize it for what it was or take care with it. And that began a very big, what I want to say, self protective action, right? That I started to pull back and think that maybe sharing all of that innocence wasn't the greatest thing.
Yeah.
Were you connecting with it that way also?
Yeah, I think that that it's shut down, and that there's so much wisdom when we're little, and it's not respected, and it's and then when we get older, and I loved what you just said about, so then we start protecting ourselves from our own innocence.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely I have some more stuff about that for sure in the show. So I appreciate you calling very much. Was there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, I'm loving the show. I think it's not something we talk about, is innocence, and that we give it a positive spin. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
So, gosh, that is so awesome. we got to have someone share their own viewpoint about it. You can see how it makes the conversation richer when it's not just what I'm trying to put out and or is on my mind, but that actually somebody else connects and how they see it and how they think about it. And in past shows, you've heard me talk a lot about beginner's mind. So it's a great thing that, Ruthie, that you brought into the conversation. So before I took that call, I was really talking about that that this innocence when we were children, that we actually get caught in an adult's incomplete healing process or another child's growing up experience. And so that does produce this kind of heartbreaking and sad and experience, and it brings anger and disappointment and I think a whole bunch of other human feelings. I could describe the innocence through this idea that it gets shattered, right? Or with lost because of these moments when our open hearts are mishandled and we're then left with circumstances that are bigger than our mind and our body can contain. So words like trauma or shaming or neglect or rejection, they all have some connection. They have something to do. They're interwoven with innocence that's not truly honored and respected or kept intact. And it's funny because Ruthie, you actually said not respected, and it was one of the things I wanted to bring out. So this is the place to start when thinking about innocence. This is the place we start. So when we come back from break, we'll talk a little bit more about how to make sure that you connect and go inside around your own relationship to innocence in the context of how it might not have been nurtured and supported.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Okay, we're back. I'm Sam Parrotto, and you're listening to Expedition Self. Today we are talking about innocence, but I just have to tell you, before we dive back into this, I just had a really great breakthrough growth moment. I actually put my headphones, I took them off in the break for a moment, and I ran and got my water. And I'm usually so afraid that I'm going to mess with something or pull a plug that I just won't move. Like I'm frozen here, like trying to make sure I don't screw something up. But I did it. I got my water. Is that the coolest thing? So, all right. So we were talking about this idea of what happens to our innocence when we're young. And when you're going to play with this idea, where you want to start. So you want to connect to the interactions, right? The exchanges, the experiences, the scenarios, and the relationships where you felt innocent, where you gave of yourself to someone and it didn't provide the kind of return or reaction that you were expecting or hoping for. And I'd like to just tell you about a friend I had in the 5th grade. Her name was Michelle. And at the time, I remember registering that she felt so innocent to me. And it was probably because I had so much drama and intense stuff going on in my own house that I, at some level, did not experience myself as innocent. She was kind and sweet and giving. And when I was in her home, her family, they had this quiet veil that wrapped itself around every chair and along every wall. And she actually wore that feel every day. And I recognized it as something I didn't really know what to do with. And that was about as far as my mind could get about it. And so I couldn't stay friends with her. And I'm pretty sure it hurt her feelings. So Michelle, if you ever hear this, I'm sending this out to you. I'm sorry. I wasn't mean or anything, but I know I just backed away, and I can still see her eyes. Yeah, I can see the innocence in her eyes. So if you're going to go inside about this, you want to look for innocence in all of the places you saw it, both within you and with others. So let me describe it, if I can, one more time. It's this place of open-heartedness that's not overridden or dominated by thoughts and directions and driving about something. It's a watching and a listening and receiving and a willingness to truly, deeply experience the moment without jumping to conclusions about what's going on or pre-planning or attempting to organize it so it generates some desired outcome. There's no strategizing. There's just accepting and allowing and learning and wondering. This is the innocence you want to go inside and look for, and be willing, really willing, to feel what comes up. When I was making notes for today's show, gosh, the tears flowed. I can't look into my eyes of wonder. And I'm describing going, like, looking inside and not well up. Perhaps you'll have a different reaction, but whatever it is, try not to turn away, because you're wanting to see this childhood innocence with reverence, and perhaps the reverence that it didn't receive when you were actually at that age. I also want to throw in a practical way you can work with your inner child's innocence. Find a picture of yourself when you're young and write a letter to her or him. Acknowledge them for what they dealt with, and notice the places where the heart was given and how that went, and actually write about it and give yourself permission to do it. And if you want to cry, let yourself cry. I don't know how many people are like, I don't want to cry, I never want to cry, I don't want to cry. My nose gets red, I don't want to cry. My skin gets blotchy. Listen, crying is just so incredibly liberating. Another example is you can go on a walk outside, like right now, well, after my show, and imagine walking with you at a younger age and engage in a real dialogue about what you're seeing and what you're feeling. Or you can, for a whole day, you can notice innocence in everything and every moment in everybody, right? Know that it is present somewhere in everyone, even if it's been covered over by years of surviving and living and getting, to the next step. All right, so let's take a walk over the next hill, right? So we are wired to learn. It's a guaranteed byproduct of the experiencing of life. We will learn. We're going to get something out of it one way or another, even if we don't even think we are. So you could think of it inside of this idea that we have this innocence. But with every day in life, there's this counterbalancing that's equally trying to get its hand on the wheel. Like the way cars now, they keep you from going over the line. Some of the modern cars, it's a safety measure. Yeah, there's this counterbalancing between innocence and learning. And it has to do with wanting to collect and absorb and become more knowledgeable about living and all the things that actually have to do with that. So we set out, without realizing it, to become less naive, less gullible, less childlike. And if you think about it, we might even look down upon our innocence. We might put it down, thinking it's the reason we felt some disappointment or hurt or some vulnerability in life, right? Our heads can say, forget innocence, baby, I want to know. And we work really hard to know things. I mean, think about it. How hard is it to admit that you don't know something or you don't have the answer? So in a lot of ways, we begin to chase the opposite qualities of being as a way to feel confident, as a way to be strong, as a way to be untouchable and unhurtable. Very interesting, right? We don't even think that they're working at odds, or at least on the surface, they look like they're looking up. I couldn't say that. Working at odds. There we go. So we end up with an internal relationship that can cause innocence to be seen as a less valuable way of being. And in some ways, it may be seen as a weakness or a drag, an actual drag on our success in life. And Ruthie, you nailed it when you called in and talked about that. And so this is why I really wanted to talk about it today, because I think we have to return and celebrate the role that innocence plays in our desire to evolve, in our intention to grow. Because I feel like if we don't, then all the things we're seeing happen in the world right now, or even the places where our families are not as aligned, has something to do with that place in themselves that is trying to get away from innocence. See, everything about growth is like peeling back the layers, pushing the veils to the side so that we can see what lives in the unconscious more clearly. And this idea that your life is really a combination of conscious thought and blind spots and every moment you've ever occupied that lives in your subconscious and your emotional experience. And let's not forget the constant body sensing. This is your life. This is being. So if you keep trying to know more and more and more and occur as less and less hurtable or disruptible, you're going to get further from the fresh, most alive, crisp, bold, and original aspects of yourself. See, that no matter what you encounter in the outside world, all the people and places around you, how you interact with your inside self dictates how that will go and what you'll take away from it. Now, I think this is really hard to describe, but I'm going to try to say it again. It's like my relationship between innocence and knowing. Think of them as like beings, like that they occupy their own space. And how they relate together, how they get along as if they were friends or they're not friends or they're cousins, but they watch each other from the other side of the room. One makes you feel at risk and the other makes you feel solid. And so which one do you like better? That inner relationship is exactly what you take into the outside world. So if you're trying to get away from your innocence, then you'll also avoid it when you encounter it. Exactly as it happened for me with my friend Michelle. Exactly as it happened. I just could not be with her. And of course, innocence is an incredibly powerful way to experience life, even though we feel at risk. Think of it as turning the knob on a door and walking into a room that the light is not yet on, or walking around the corner of a hike, right? A pathway that you go up and over the edge of the hill and you can't see the other side. It's risky. I mean, that would feel risky. It does feel risky, right? So a commitment to innocence within ourselves It means that we're going to go to the gym every single day because as we encounter each and every moment, as if we don't already know what it is, we're getting a true heart workout. Boom, 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 right? And this heart workout, see if you can get in touch with it with me. It's like I say, oh gosh, I don't know what that is. I can feel my heart beat faster. I'm in the present and I'm breathing, I'm hearing my breath, and I wait the next thing that grabs my attention, and my mind is racing around, but I'm not indulging in it. I'm standing here willing to feel, and I don't know what I might feel. I'm listening. I'm listening to my body and to the muscles, and I'm trusting myself that something will show up that's important to me, that's relevant for me to be with. See, that's it. That's what's going on in the space when I'm in that innocent moment. That's what's happening. It's like being that present. See, this is a much bigger moment than, oh yeah, I recognize this or that, or I'll just keep on walking. That kind of glossing over or even numbing out to feeling and being with what just happened. Right? This is like, oh yeah, I'm breathing. Oh yeah, okay, what's going on? I'm open. Okay, I'm going to blank out all this stuff, this extra stuff that I know I put in the space so that I don't have to experience this newness. This idea of innocence is one where you rope your head or your mind or ego or whatever you want to call it in, and you say, you don't get to know here because I'm going to show up as if we don't know. And the truth is, for everything you do know, there are 100 things, 100 other things about it that you have yet to learn. That's humility there, baby. Yes, it is. So showing up, really showing up, it requires innocence. Because otherwise your mind and your knowing will need to dominate it in a way that's reductionary, right? It reduces what's possible to what you could really have of your understanding of how to do that. So a couple scenarios or two, right? We could apply it. So I remember when I went to college in my mid-30s, I had gone to college, for a little bit when I was like 19, and then I went back to take some classes and, right, see what I could do with it. So I signed up for a class and, not thinking, I just figured I'd go to class and do the homework. I mean, I really didn't understand that I had changed, that I was much older, and that even sitting in a college classroom might feel very different. So there I am, in my desk that I sat back in, right? And I'm getting ready to take the first quiz of the semester after 2 weeks of class. And I have no idea what I'm doing or what I was supposed to study. Like I realize as I look at the questions, I am completely unprepared and I start crying. Yes, this is true. I cry over things. So I signed up for the class because I was following that deep intuitive voice, that I was talking about with my mom. And so there I am in with a bunch of 8-year-olds who are at very different stages of life. I'm completely overwhelmed because I have no idea what to do. And I want to tell you, I don't think I was committed to being innocent. I think I was walking around thinking I had it handled. I expected myself to know what to do. So I got up out of my seat, not really having any idea. I think this is when I moved into this idea of being innocent. And I walked up to Dr. Agnew. She could clearly, visibly see that I was really not good. And she looked at me and she said, "It's hard to be in a spot when you don't recognize anything, isn't it? Or know what to do about it. Coming to school at this time is probably surprisingly harder than you ever expected." Oh, and she was so compassionate. Talk about somebody who took care with my innocence, right? She said, "Let's find a way to help you." And she did. She was amazing. And that's probably a story. The rest of that story is for another show. But she got it. She got me. And I guess there was enough innocence in that forlorn and desperate way that I was talking that she found an opening to help me. Sometimes the scenarios that they force innocence through our hearts. And I think a lot of times we look at those scenarios with disgust, like at some level, until we're years past them, right? In the moment, we're like, oh, that was awful. I didn't want to live through that, when really it was this great gift that innocence gave us. Thank goodness, right? Innocence allows us to relate to moments as if they are new. And let's face it, when you get up day after day after day after day, you probably don't feel new. You look at the same hand, you look at the same foot, you look at the same sun, you look at the same toaster that you put your toast in for breakfast. And so although we like to know stuff, so we stay safe and comfortable, doing life as if it is new, as if we're in that beginner mind, it helps us to keep out of the dreaded downers of resignation, pessimism, and cynicism. When I wrote the initials for those, RPC, all I could think of was Aretha Franklin and RESPCT. So that's how I'm thinking of them, as RPC are the dreaded downers. And they definitely have something to do with innocence. So when we come back, we'll go into RPC.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Okay, we're back. I'm Sam Parrotto. You're listening to Expedition Self. And just before we went on break, while we're talking about innocence, I mentioned RPC, which I consider the dreaded downers: resignation, pessimism, and cynicism. If you think about all three of those, they have a knowing that has turned into permanence about them. And if you think about everything we've been talking about, innocence is about the new, and it's about staying in this open-hearted space. So I call them the dreaded downers because when they're left to run rampant in an unconscious way in our lives, everyone loses. And of course, that includes you. So instead of relating to moments and interactions as new, we preclude what it's all about. And the nature of our communication actually causes it to go that way. I just want to take one little moment and say, remember when I said earlier that how you relate to yourself is how you relate to the world. Remember, if you're experiencing resignation, pessimism, and cynicism, that means you're dealing with that with yourself. You are bringing that to yourself in some way, right? So they're dreaded downers, not right because they're like bad, but because you have to recognize them for their role. So instead of collecting data and being curious about what it all means, we instead collect data that reinforces how we already see it. And the more we do that, the more things stay the same. Instead of experimenting and trying out an idea or a way to engage with something, we conclude that it's not worth it. We never risk anything. And sometimes we even resent the entire thing for not working. Instead of opening our hearts, we stay enclosed, remote and unavailable and unwilling to have an experience. And then the unexpected or the everyday miracles just can't happen. And instead of being kind and gentle and receptive, well, we trump right over the top of the most amazing wonders and sights of a life moment. So you see, innocence is the doorway to creating something new. Innocence is the doorway to creating something new. It's the quality that when present, when it's allowed to deliver on its mission, will deliver something you can't plan for or control. And because of that, it brings awe and wonder and feeling and aliveness. And when it isn't present, well, then the dreaded downers, RPC, they take over, they run the show. So it's important to recognize that I'm not saying you shouldn't feel resignation and pessimism and cynicism. Gosh, that is a mouthful. Because when you can notice that they're showing up at your life party, and yes, your life is a party, not always a happy one, right? You have an opportunity to go over and get to know why they're there. But if you let them take over, right, take over the party, well, then innocence can't make an appearance. Innocence can't get on the dance floor. It can't deliver on the mission set for it. Because innocence helps you to stay vulnerable and keep working on opening your heart. It's the place where idealism and ignorance can dance, where possibility and denial intertwine, and where the new and the old must square off. It's a sort of like in-between space where you get to work ideas or beliefs or human stuff that seems to be opposite, or they don't even get on the dance floor at the same time, but you get to interrelate them and see what happens because you're bringing this attention to not knowing. So idealism, this place where our hearts, they get inspired and they want more for everyone, like the source of why you do what you do to create more in life. That's idealism, right? It's this imagined possibility and hope. And then there's ignorance, the not knowing what it will take, the having no clue how reality will bump against it, and being in the dark about the forces at play that might thwart your plan. So to be able to blend these together and actually find a new wisdom, we don't blend them together. We keep them separate. We're idealistic, right? Or we're ignorant. Or we're all knowing. I should add a third one in there. Let's put that one on the dance floor too, right? It gives you a platform or a way to have inner conversation about two things that would normally work separately or cancel each other out. So possibility and denial. These are two very real parts of life. Where, like you ask yourself, where am I in denial about how it really goes? And how does my sense of possibility block me from seeing it? You see, by maintaining my innocence, my acceptance, I'm accepting what I am and where I am, I will look closer. I'll study both until I find a point where they intersect and I start to experience, oh, how do these two things work? Because our minds, remember, are always trying to cancel things out so that we can know, so we can be safe, so that we can be comfortable. So this innocence I'm describing, it's a necessary way of being if we're going to find flow inside of the self. You know, without it, we cause denial to operate in an entirely separate quadrant, there we go, than possibility. And we'll section off our idealism so it doesn't overlap with the reality as we know it. And this deprives us of really seeing all that there is to see and feel and ultimately become wise about. It's funny because, right, as you're listening and you think about this, we actually do know more because of innocence. But trying to know deprives us of innocence. Wisdom, the way I see it, is really an ever-expanding capacity to hold what is at any given moment. So even the RPCs, they belong in there too. But innocence is one of the most essential elements, right? It's like the lifeblood that causes the expansion. Okay, I'm going to take a breath here. So let's pause for a moment. I've talked about the innocence of our childhood and making sure you spend a lot of time in there and understanding what happened for you. Then we've talked about how our need to know and learn and become invincible is very much a part of our drive as human beings. And that learning oftentimes is helping us to actually drown out our innocence. And that this inner relationship is very meaningful because innocence really provides us with the pathway to experience life as new and original. And ultimately, it helps us to become wise. So wisdom, it doesn't drown out innocence. In fact, the more wise we become, the more we realize that we don't know what we don't know. And even the stuff we think we know, we don't really know. And we don't have to know anymore because we actually develop a new level of trust in the experience. Because wisdom, it is amazement. It's an acceptance of all that is present, whether we saw it before or not. There's a recognition that all the knowing in the world can't take away the pain of life, nor should it. And there's a definite understanding that there's no fix for avoiding the entirety of what life has to offer. Yeah, wisdom doesn't bypass the pain, right? It embraces it. And then in seeking to understand, it helps us come to realize that there's no way to figure it all out. And so because of this, when the RPCs show up, it's really a sign, it's a way for us to work with ourselves that someone's heart wasn't able to work through something, rather than using it as a reason to give up themselves or on someone else. Okay, so here's my big statement of the show. Innocence is wisdom's child. Yep, that's how I think about it. So this trusting of the innocent, how do you do this without feeling like you've turned your brain off? Because innocence, it doesn't exist in your psyche by itself. It's supported by your whole, like an investment in life, right? Like in being whole. So I want to ask you about this. Do you have a commitment like the one I just described? This investment in your life and being whole. Are you invested in feeling everything, in showing up for the hard stuff, in seeing the unseen or the hidden parts of you? And are you willing to claim all of your life, every moment of every day? You know, I would ask you, what are you committed to? And how does innocence fit inside this? How do you take yourself on and allow two very different ways of seeing your life to actually work things out, to debate and to question each other? Are you willing to find the squishy place inside where you are in wonder, where you intend it, you bring it, right? You're willing to be in shock and surprise and not knowing, you're willing to not know what lies in the unobserved. And you really, really bring that to each and every one of your relationships, to every day of your job, to the interactions that happen as you run your daily errands or handle the hullabaloo of taking care of stuff. You see, what I'm saying is that innocence is supported by a commitment to be whole, to want the whole ride, to really want to be your whole self. Because the minute you do that, it opens that doorknob, it opens the doorway, and innocence is allowed to help you get there. Where are RPCs at play in your psyche? Really, in this day and age, how much of your psyche is spent being pessimistic or cynical? How resigned are you to things just the way they are? And if you were really opening the door to innocence, how would you be different with your loved ones? With the strangers you complain about? How would you rethink the way you spend your heart? I found a poem that I think is really perfect for today. I think we have enough time for me to read it. And I want to say thank you for being on the show. I will pop back in after I finish with the show. I'll come back and say goodbye. All right, here we go. It's by Jim Uhrman, and it's called Innocence. There is a purity born into every baby, an innocence that runs deep. I imagine every parent feels it whenever they watch their baby sleep. We not only see it in the way they sleep, but in the morning when they rise. We see it in the way they look at us. It's in their smile. It's in their eyes. I saw it in my children and grandchildren, in the different things they'd say and do. And I imagine you've seen it in your children and in your grandchildren too. I'm also sure you've seen it even if you don't have children, if that was never meant to be, because innocence is one of the easiest and most endearing sights our eyes will ever see. Yes, if you want to view a little innocence, watch a child, listen to their sounds, you'll quickly come to realize that is where innocence abounds. And we're not alone. Nature also sees their innocence, for why do you suppose? She allows the ladybug to crawl upon their finger and the butterfly to land upon their nose. But innocence is fragile, and as the years go by, if it's not cared for, if it's not nurtured, there's a chance that it may die. So I pray once born, once created, once that innocence arrives, we'll do our best with our children to keep that innocence alive. For I can think of nothing more distressing, more tragic, a more sorrowful expense than a child who's lost their purity, who's lost their trust, who's lost their innocence. And I hope when I read that, you applied that to your own inner child as well. And I want to wish you love and peace, and I want to send all of the healing thoughts I can to the world and the war in Ukraine. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week.